Biodiversity is everywhere we go. From the animals to the flowers, it is unavoidable. Biodiversity is important because without it, humans would not be able to survive. It is no secret that ecosystems have been destroyed and taken advantage of. In the United States, there are 62 national parks across the country that focus on conserving these ecosystems and what they have to offer. This information is important to learn because as years go by, we as human beings should know what is happening to our world around us and what is being done to protect it. As a college student, our lives are just beginning, and if conservation practices are not used, ecosystems could be fully destroyed by the time we are middle-aged adults. To begin, I have provided you with an overview of today's presentation. It is important to understand what biodiversity is and why it is important. It is also important to understand the various ecosystems there are because I will be mentioning them various times throughout the presentation. I will discuss the national parks, including where they are found along the USA, along with their conservation tactics. I will be focusing on 3 national parks, and specifically Yellowstone, Yosemite, and the Indiana Dunes. Alongside, I will be explaining what types of strategies could be possibly used that have not been used yet. Before diving into my presentation, it is important for you as my audience to first have a general understanding of what biodiversity actually is. According to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the academic definition of biodiversity is biological diversity in an environment as indicated by numbers of different species of plants and animals. Now, every plant and animal needs different needs to survive. That is why throughout the country you can find different ecosystems. There are said to be 6 different types of ecosystems: forests, deserts, grasslands, tundras, a freshwater ecosystem, and a marine water ecosystem. I am bringing these up because when I later discuss the different parks, it is important to remember that each one will have different conservation practices because they are found in a different geographic region. For the sake of this presentation, I will be focusing on forested and freshwater ecosystems. However, I do believe it is important to be knowledgeable of all 6. Growing up, I have lived 20 minutes from the dunes prior to moving to college. So when experts classify the dunes as one of the most biodiverse parks in the world, they are not wrong as I have witnessed it firsthand my entire life. There is the dunes aspect with Lake Michigan. However, in the park lies a savanna complex, wetland complex, and a prairie and forest complex that not many people know about. However, it is surrounded by industrial development which pollutes the air and the water within. Identified threats include invasive species, fragmentation, which is the process of separating reduced phytogenes, and of course, pollution. To refresh our memory, earlier in class we learned that fire was in fact actually good for an environment because it eliminates invasive species and things unwanted, restoring nutrients back into the ground. According to the Dunes Conservation Fund, restoration practices have been put into place to protect and preserve the ecosystem, and cooperative management has been aligned to help with things such as prescribed fires. When it comes to pollution, Colin Deverell, Midwest Program Manager for the National Parks Conservation Association, states that U.S. Steel must be held accountable for its continued pollution, including poisoning waterways for millions of people and ignoring the impacts to the dunes and its more than 2 million annual visitors. Finally, public awareness campaigns have started so that when tourists go to these sites, they know how to properly act and have a better understanding of preservation practices. Moving along, we have Yosemite National Park located in California's Sierra Nevada mountains. It is a temperate forest ecosystem with beautiful waterfalls. Being a temperate forest ecosystem means that this park receives high levels of precipitation and humidity year-round. There are still issues that lie underneath the beauty, however. Although the scenery is preserved, invasive species remain present and air pollution mixed with fire suppression does not help. A new arising issue that has been brought to the public's attention is the amount of pollution that there is. Unlike the dunes, the pollution has been expected as it is located near an industrial site. The pollution issue has taken a while to arise and is not going anywhere. According to the World Heritage Outlook, which is the first global assessment of ecosystems and provides the latest on conservation practices, in order to reduce the global carbon footprint, solar panels and hybrid vehicles have been implemented. They are also practicing the stopping of cutting down trees because they recognize that if trees are cut down, that is the stopping of healthy air. These parks have a purpose, and that is to keep what they have owned safe and focus on improving conditions. In an article by Sebastian Martinuzzi, a scientist who specializes in conservation at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, titled Enhancing Biodiversity Conservation in Existing Land Use Plans, he states that high rates of deforestation and biodiversity loss make conservation efforts urgent. He continues further in his article and also adds that updating the current land use plans also help, and they can impact human influence too. The last park we will be discussing is Yellowstone. Yellowstone is the first national park to be established as a hydrothermal and geologic wonder. It is located in 3 different states: Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. One specific example of a struggling issue would be the invasive species messing with the food chain. In class, we talked about this prior, but in 1903, according to an article research report titled Playing God in Yellowstone, published in the Public News, when Yellowstone Rangers decided to exterminate the elk's natural predator, the wolf, they created an eruption of elk, and natural regulation suggests that the number of elk would stabilize without man having to kill. Instead, the elk population began to become very competitive, and the prey decreased significantly. The situation was controlled later, and Yellowstone has now developed a well-thought-out plan. I believe that Yellowstone can provide as an example to other national parks because by being the first national park, they have learned what has been successful and what has not. They have decided to switch to biodegradable materials. They have developed small renewable energy systems and have practiced the reduction of hazardous waste. They have also implemented water stations, and they have trained their employees to know what is okay and what is not. When it comes to questions, there are a lot, so I have narrowed them down to the ones that I believe will be most asked. To begin, what other types of conservation have been successful in regards to forest conservation? In forest conservation, outside of parks, limits on how many trees can be cut down per mile and other rules such as those have been implemented. Companies have also divided forests so that after every major cut down, they have time to build back up because trees take a very long time to fully grow, and that is why they have to plan strategically. Secondly, what is the goal for preservation practices? The goal is to simply provide better living conditions and give hope for future generations for a greener environment. Number 3, why didn't I cover marine ecosystems? Marine ecosystems have an entirely different type of conservation practice which are relevant to forest ecosystems. Number 4, how do other countries look at the USA in regards to conservation practices? They see the USA as successful role models. To be direct, in an article by John Shelnaz, other national parks in underdeveloped countries say that they are failing because they do not live up to the Yellowstone model simply because they do not have the resources or knowledge. With Yellowstone being the model national park, it provides a great goal for other countries to strive for. When you look at these, and the last question, why is having knowledgeable employees important? When you look at these national parks inside of the parks, it can be considered a business, and you would not hire employees that do not know what they are doing, and if they are knowledgeable, then you know that you're putting your best effort forward.